Peace, everybody. It's Mr. Solodolo. Thank y'all for tuning in for this video. I wanted to explain the biblical perspective on suffering and the reason why God allows us to bear suffering. So there's a reason for this, and we're not just suffering for no purpose or no reason. No, there is a legit reason why God's people endure a period of suffering. So let me get into this perspective. Many wonder how a loving God could allow such deep suffering in the world. The Bible addresses this issue head on. The Bible affirms God's love as well as the stark realities of suffering. It also tells us the way of salvation in Jesus Christ, who bore the punishment for sin and gives a future hope to all who put their faith in him. It says this in John 3:16 to 18. These are not my words, these are words from the Bible itself. Jesus also promised to be with his people through their earthly sufferings. Jesus also promised to be with his people through their earthly sufferings. And this is what we're dealing with. We're going through the world suffering. You know, these are earthly sufferings that God is putting us through. But these are the type of sufferings that we can overcome. John 16:33. And God sees the sufferings of his children and enables us to bear up under them. He wants us to bear up under our sufferings. Wants us to bear up under them. And whatever problem we have, whatever struggles we are dealing with, we need to hold it in captivity and give it to God. He also redeems and uses our suffering for his good purposes in Romans 8:28. So ultimately, all suffering is a result. Now, I need y'all to pay close attention to this statement. Ultimately, all suffering is a result of the fall which occurred at the dawn of creation, when the first man, which was Adam, and the first woman, which was Eve, chose to disobey their creator, God. Genesis 2:16 through 17. So the result of their disobedience was pain, suffering, and death for all of humanity thenceforth. Genesis 3:16 through 19. So think about the reason why we're going through suffering was because of Adam and Eve. They chose to disobey God. They went against God's rules and instruction. He told them not to pick the fruit from the tree. I don't know if it was the tree of consciousness, or the tree of life. But he told them to not pick the fruit, and Eve went against God and she picked the fruit. So God allows suffering to happen here on earth. And that's not just one example. There's many examples many, many examples of God's people disobeying him and being disobedient towards him. So he will bring the pain and suffering and death for all humanity. The earth itself was cursed as a result of the fall. Romans 8:20 to 21. So now we are born into a hostile world, right? A hostile world, and have an innate hostility toward God himself. We're looking at God like, yo, God, why are you punishing us? Yo, God, why are you making us suffer? Yo, God, why is there so much death and so much killing taking place? Why is there so much pain and suffering? We're looking at God like it's his fault, that he's the reason why we're all suffering. We're blaming it all on God. And we're not looking at ourselves. We're not taking accountability for us being disobedient. And this is, we all fall short in the glory of God. But there's a reason why we've been suffering, because we have been disobedient. We have went against God in so many ways, and so many times we went against the Lord. And we have sinned countless times. And the world today is filled with sinners. And most of those people are not going to repent. They just won't. So it says that in Colossians 1:21, where, okay, we were born into a hostile world and have an innate hostility toward God himself. So this state of separation and alienation from God, see, we start to separate ourselves. We start to alienate from God because of the suffering that we're going through, that we're dealing with, the pain, the death, right? From God is perhaps the most painful suffering we can experience. Let me say that one more time in case y'all did not hear me. The state of separation and alienation from God is perhaps the most painful suffering we can experience. Ephesians 2:12. Once again, not my words. These are words from the Bible. These are verses in the Bible. But amazingly and graciously and lovingly, God did not leave us in such a painful state. Instead, he overcame the consequences of sin through his own suffering. So you may think that Jesus did not have to suffer. And I stated in my last video that Jesus had to fast 40 days and 40 nights in order to receive something from God. More wisdom, whatever it was. He got closer to God because of him fasting for 40 days and 40 nights. That was his own suffering. And he was tempted by the devil multiple times. You don't think Jesus had to suffer? So if Jesus had to suffer, most likely we are going to suffer. So God took on human flesh in the person of his son, Jesus Christ, and suffered the punishment which is due on us. He who was without sin. It says in Corinthians chapter 2, 5:16 through 21. He who was without sin suffered the guilt the pain and humiliation of having the sins of the world placed on himself. So guys, I just gave y'all a brief description and read y'all the perspective, the biblical perspective of suffering, and the reason why today we are enduring so much pain and suffering and death, especially this year in 2022. There has been so much death happening, so much suffering happening. And honestly, God is sick and tired of this world. God is letting his wrath be shown to the world. God is not holding back his wrath no longer. And, right now he's an angry God because he sees the wickedness and demonic things that are taking place on this planet. So don't think that suffering is not for no reason. And don't think suffering don't think suffering is a forever thing. It's not permanent. And I will get to that in a later video. But for now, I'm going to leave y'all with that. Make sure y'all look these verses up. John 3:16. I'm going to quote these verses in the description. John 3:16 to 18. John 16 to 33. Genesis 2:16 to 17. Genesis 3:16 to 19. Look up Romans 8:7, Ephesians 2:12, and chapter 2, Corinthians 5:16 and 21. So these are the verses that y'all need to look up about the perspective of suffering. What does the Bible say about suffering? So that being said, man, make sure y'all like the video for the algorithm. Subscribe if you are new. Thank y'all for tuning in and watching, and I'm out, man. Peace.